the coffee beans. And you know what? The music that the coffee plant gave us was tutum, 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 pa-pa-pum, pa-pum. It was so bouncy and so jumpy and so rhythmic, more than any other plant. Guess what? All this energy, all this caffeine. And the marimba would be the best thing to play those sounds that came from the coffee plant. So that's how I worked. And then on top of all that, I came up with the crazy idea of what if I bring a singer? Because I was thinking this is the plant songs, but who's singing?
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. A friend and I were discussing what it took to get decades into a practice and work it to the point where it becomes something of a perpetual motion machine. He said it came down to this: persistence. The willingness to go through learning again and again what works and what doesn't, what attitudes help with gaining traction and which ones impede forward motion. And for that matter, an ability to go from difficulty to difficulty in a cheerful way. Not the Pollyanna attitude of it's all good and the universe will provide, but more being able to take troubles and unexpected turns of fortune and somehow digest it into something nutritive. Some folk might have persistence built into their DNA. For the rest of us, it's a kind of cultivation, something that requires attention, a willingness to stay with following the learning through to a place where there's comfort with methods that can only be honed through iterative engagement. We have to fumble our way into a basic capacity and then refine that into skill. In time, you don't just see what your teacher saw. You learn how to discern through your own experience. I don't have any good advice on how to cultivate persistence. I suspect it takes an annoying measure of stubbornness, a deaf ear to those who care about you as they express their concern for your ongoing travails, a willingness to dedicate yourself to something that you might be wrong about, and giving it 10 to 15 years to see if you were right or not. It takes being able to find some pleasure in working out the difficult parts, an ability to see where you're wrong without blaming your circumstances. It takes a capacity to course correct and be cheerful about it and make the most of lucky breaks, but not depend on them. Mostly, I think it requires a kind of undeserved dedication that only makes sense in retrospect. Being dedicated to our capital W work, it takes a mix of love, determination, perhaps a measure of obsession, and a kind of willingness to keep moving forward, especially when the way forward is not clear. There are no guarantees. In essence, you are being asked to trade your cow for a handful of magic beans. In this conversation with Rick Gold and Yuval Ron, we explore how music affects our brainwaves, emotions, and the health of our neural pathways. Like an opera singer's voice can shatter different glasses with different tones, so too frequencies can have a profound effect on our neurology. Yuval, with his background in music composition and scoring, and Rick with his background in Chinese medicine, have come together to explore the healing power of music and recently brought to fruition a 5-year exploration in capturing and recording the bioactivity of medicinal plants, and then like a master herbalist writing a prescription, weaving them into a therapeutic melody. What did they discover? You're going to hear all about it right after this. We are grateful to the sponsors who support Geological. Here's a preview of solutions that our sponsors have for you. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs has a formula to take the achoo out of springtime. Over on the Shop Talk side of the house, we are featuring conversations on reproductive health. Later in the show, you'll hear why Jane is my favorite EMR with their extensive feature list and ability to customize to your unique clinic. And Blue Poppy has a great solution for seasonal allergies that you'll want to know about. Visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for the listeners of the podcast. Picture this, a backyard barbecue, spring moving into summer, the kind of day that smells like cut grass, honeysuckle, and someone's dad rocking the barbecue. Kids are running through the sprinklers, old friends are laughing about the past, someone's grandma's at the card table, absolutely dismantling everyone at gin rummy. She's merciless and having the time of her life, and then you sneeze several times in rapid succession. She doesn't even put her cards down. Jade screen and xanthium formula. You blink. What? Jade screen and xanthium formula for the sinuses. Golden flowered Chinese herbs has it. She lays down her hand. Gin. Again. You're welcome. Golden flowered Chinese herbs carries jade screen and xanthium formula and other prescriptions for seasonal allergies. This spring, you'll be back at that barbecue. Eyes clear, breathing easy, maybe even winning a hand or two. Probably not, though. Grandma's been doing this a lot longer than you. Golden flowered Chinese herbs, where tradition meets care. Our Geological Shop Talk series on reproductive health continues this month with Stephen Cowan exploring growth not as a straight line, but as a spiral that circles back even as it carries us forward. In our discussion on the challenges of change in the teen years. And on the other side of the arc, Kath Berry joins us to talk about sexual vitality and health in the post-productive years. Visit the Geological website to watch these discussions or subscribe to Geological Shop Talk wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Yuval Ron, Rick Gold, welcome to Geological.
Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
It's always fun talking about medicine and magic and alchemy and just the amazing stuff that's in the world. You guys, I think the best way that I can think about what you two cats are up to at this point in time, you're like musical alchemists. You're doing some really interesting stuff. And we're going to get into this. It connects to medicine. It connects to spirit. It connects to, I mean, my God, music is like the soundtrack of our lives in so many ways. So, Yuval, I'd like to begin with you. What got you started on this path that you find yourself on that brings us into this conversation today?
Well, the first experience that I had with music and medicine was when I graduated from Berklee College of Music in Boston. I was a student there in the mid-'80s, and I studied film scoring because I wanted to write music for films and TV. And before that, I had experience writing music for theater and dance, contemporary dance. And then I find my way to Berklee College of Music, which is one of the best schools in the world for contemporary music and jazz and film scoring. And when I graduated, I looked for a job. And I looked in a magazine, and there was an ad looking for a composer. And I just jumped on it, and I applied. And after a few months, they told me that I was chosen to be the composer for that project. And what it said is that it's the Monroe Institute looking for a composer for binaural beats, hemisync sound, neurological music for therapeutic use. I didn't know anything about that. I knew about jazz, I knew about film music, I knew about theater music, but it was a job. And I just got
from
it.
the back of a magazine.
Exactly, from the back of a magazine. So I was really excited that I got the job. Right out of school, I got a composing job. And nobody believed me that I just got it like that. And, they probably had thousands and thousands of applicants. And, everybody sent their portfolio. And I don't know why they chose me, and they did. And they were interested that I'm a film composer, that I have training in One of the things that I studied in school it's called psychoacoustics. And this is a scientific field, psychoacoustics. It's a psychology of sound. Why do humans feel afraid when they hear slow, low tones? Why do people feel happy and peaceful when they hear a major chord, do, mi, sol, mi, do? And why do they feel sad when you do a minor key chord, da, 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 da? Why? And some of those things are universal. It doesn't matter which culture you're in. It doesn't matter where you grew up around the world. It doesn't matter. There's certain universal reactions, like a smile, body language. When you go all around the world and you expose your teeth and you smile, everywhere in the world, doesn't matter what culture you are, it's disarming the other person. So there's things like this in music and sound that are universal. They are beyond cultures. And that's amazing. And that has to do with how we are wired. And it's a neurological response to sound vibrations. And that is called psychoacoustics. And in order to be a film composer, I had to study in school psychoacoustics to understand how to manipulate the emotions and the thoughts of the audience when the director tells me, I want the audience to feel a little bit afraid, but not really think that it's scary. I want them to feel that it's going to turn to be funny rather than horror movie. But I want them to pay attention, but not be afraid. How do you do that with music? It's very particular. It's very particular manipulation of the emotions and the thoughts of the listener. And I need to do it with music. I'm not going to be there in the theater. I need to compose this music, and it's going to be part of the movie. And no matter where this movie is played, in Korea or in Bangkok or in Berlin or in New York, the director wants all the audience members to feel and think what the director wants them to feel and think. And that's my job as a film composer. And so when the Monroe Institute, that was run back then by Robert Monroe, who was the pioneer scientist, researcher of binaural beats and neurological responses to sound and using sound for therapy, he started this institute in Virginia called the Monroe Institute. So he was very interested in this, the fact that I had the training as a film composer and I knew how psychoacoustics works. And he met with me on the phone. It was 1989. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. He called me. I heard a low tone, of a gentleman with a southern accent from Virginia. And he had a very radiophonic, deep tone, very authoritative. And he basically taught me how to do binaural beats music, which is music that modulates the brainwaves to where the scientists and the doctors want you to go. If they want you to go to meditative states, or if they want you to go to sleep states, or contemplative or creative or thinking states, or deep sleep states, all those things relates to different kind of vibrations in the brain. And they developed a method called the hemisync sound that synchronizes the two sides of the brain with sound. And so he taught me how to do it over the phone with very long conversations. And he gave me numbers, he gave me timings, he gave me all the instructions as if I'm going to write music for a movie. But instead of for a movie, it was writing music for a therapy session using the tones that they would later embed into my music. So he told me, look, there are tones that people will hear, and they're like rumble low tones. They're really boring, and it will manipulate the brainwaves of the patients in a certain way. And there's a journey of those tones, and I want your music to bring the listeners to where the tones are going. So I had to do with my music what their tones would do, and to accompany the tones and make it a beautiful and pleasurable experience for the patients. So I did like a script within 30 minutes, every minute within that 30 minutes journey, like a story that I had to express and describe with music. And that synced to the map and the journey, the arc of the tones that in the Monroe Institute they created for this journey. And that was my first experience. That was 1990. We finished this project in 1990. And then I moved on to just be a film composer and TV composer, and that brought me to Los Angeles and to work on TV shows for Fox and Warner Brothers and Disney and Paramount. And I've done this for 15 years, just composing music for film and TV. And I completely forgot about that early experience that I had. And I had no idea that I worked with Robert Monroe. I knew his name was Robert Monroe, but I had no idea that he was a pioneer researcher in the field. And I had no idea how important he is considered until almost 25 years, I would say 20 years later, where I met Dr. Gold, and Dr. Gold invited me to be creative and to create music for therapeutic use and for meditation and for healing and for Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and all the projects that Dr. Gold initiated and commissioned. And then when I was teaching in Esalen Institute with Dr. Gold, that's where we met, in a neighboring, 1 year in a neighboring classroom to my classroom, where I was teaching music and sound and sacred healing sounds and neurological, the sound and the brain. I was teaching with a neuroscientist. And next door, there was a class taught by students of Robert Monroe. This is now the second generation. They were the teachers. And somehow we bumped into the hallway, and they found out that I worked with the legendary Robert Monroe, and many of them never met him. They just heard about him. And they almost kissed my hand. It's always like, they turned me into like an Indian guru that you go down and you kiss their feet. They were holding my hand as if I'm like a relic, that I actually worked with the legendary Robert Monroe, that they're all studying his writings and his research.
And you learned it over the phone with Robert Monroe.
Over the phone. There was no internet. There was no email. There was nothing. He gave me all the information over the phone, and I was writing the timings and the instructions and everything. And then I would mail him in the regular mail, I would mail him the music recordings on tapes, on reel to reel. I would mail it to Virginia from Boston. And then he would call me and he'd give me feedback. And then I would revise and then send it back. So it was crazy. But 20 years later, I realized how lucky I was. That I learned from the master, and I worked with the one who researched and discovered those methods of binaural beats. And that was my first experience. But then through Dr. Gold and other healers and doctors and neuroscientists, over the last 15 years, I've been active in this field.
Great. I want to come back to this binaural beat thing for a moment. And you said the name of the company was Hemisync?
So they trademark of a system that they developed. They were called the Monroe Institute.
Okay, but they did a thing called Hemisync.
Hemisync sound.
Did they also do teaching videos and things as well?
I believe so.
Because the world is so weirdly interconnected. My first wife's father was really into golf. Sweet man, medical doctor, really great guy. He loved golf. And I remember, and this is back in the 80s-ish, late 80s. I think there was a thing called Hemisync, and it was these like online golfing videos, but they had these sounds that went with it. So you'd like practice your golf as you listen to these sounds, and it was supposed to help you wire in something or other that helped you to better play golf.
Exactly. It was amazing. It increased concentration.
So likewise, if I'm following correctly, you could take the beauty of a film score, like what you do, something lovely to listen to, put these binaural beats in that make your brain vibrate and wave in a certain way and make you more open to learning whatever it is that you're attempting to learn. Do I have that right?
Yeah. It can increase focus and concentration if you drive the brain to that range of vibrations, to the brain waves that facilitate focus and concentration. So it was definitely, they got involved into performance improvement, and that's what I think your father-in-law was using it, the golf. Yeah, it's incredible.
I think it's appropriate at this moment to actually explain to our listeners what binaural beats is a little more technically. And you really have to wear headphones to get the efficacy. So what you're doing is you're putting one vibration of hertz, beats per minute in one ear, and another different one in the other ear. And the brain modulates that to a third frequency, which exists only in the brain of the listener at that moment.
So it's sort of manufactured. The two waves come together in a way that creates a third wave.
And my feeling, and I haven't validated this or seen it in literature, is that it's doing something with the corpus callosum to integrate the two brain hemispheres. So one of the things we've been doing based on research in the last few years is working to create 40 hertz gamma, which is literally a miraculous frequency. And so we're doing beautiful music, and underlying the music, we're doing either 80 in one ear and 120 in the other. And the difference between those hertz is the sweet spot you're trying to achieve. So if you want to do for sleep and to get into delta, you create a very slow beat, but you're integrating the brain and then all the way through delta and then, alpha.
Tell me about 40 hertz gamma. I don't know what that means.
Well, 40 hertz was discovered by MIT over the last several years as a frequency. It's rather fast frequency, and it's part of the gamma range. The range right now, when we are talking and we are thinking, our brain vibrates in something called beta range. And the beta ranges can be around 12 or 15 pulsation a second. So imagine 12 vibrations a second. It's very fast. In 1 second, 12 vibrations. And that's how our brain is vibrating right now when we are thinking. There's a range higher than that goes from 30 vibrations a second to 100. And 40 hertz is in the bottom range of that fast range of the brain work rate, which is called gamma. And 40 hertz was found to increase blood flow in the brain, increase and speed up recovery from trauma, increase connectivity in the brain, clean the memory pathways from plaque that accumulate on the brain pathways. And that is really an incredible breakthrough, because that could possibly help and maybe eliminate dementia and Alzheimer if people do that before it's too late. It doesn't work in advanced states of dementia.
But in the earlier states, before the damage has been done.
Right. So right now they are using it, the scientists are using it with people that have early or medium stage, and they found that 1 hour a day improved the situation, that clears the memory pathway, improved memory, and also prevented the disease to get worse. So this is very exciting, and this is a whole new field in sound medicine now, the 40 hertz. So we are very active in that. The last few years, we created 7 different albums of 40 hertz music in different musical styles. So you can listen to choral music, classical piano, or jazz piano, or chill hop, which is a kind of hip hop for young people who like to study with that music, called chill hop, and they call it beats to study.
Beats chill hop.
Chill hop. It's a slow mid-tempo hip hop with no words, just instrumental. And kids,
Right.
high school and college, they love studying to that. So what we did, we created that music with 40 hertz tones. We created jazz music with 40 hertz tones. We created classical music, world music, Persian, Indian music, new age music. We even created sound effects with 40 hertz tones, like cat purr, or ocean waves, or rain, or a fireplace. And so people who wish to listen to that kind of sound or to music and have their brain be cleaned off the plaque that sits on the memory pathways and cause that cognition decline, they could listen to whatever they want and get either preventative care or improve their cognitive functions.
Now, this 40 hertz sound, is this a little bit like the binaural thing where you're doing a scoring of some kind of musical story that you want to tell and then layering this sound into it?
Yeah, the 40 hertz, what we came up with is what I call triple strength 40 hertz, triple strength. There's 3 layers. There are 3 layers of 40 hertz. So one layer is the subliminal that you don't hear, that it's like the binaural beats. And it works only if you put on your headphones, and it creates a 40 hertz wave that doesn't exist in the reality through those 2 tones in the left and the right ear. Your brain manufactured the 40 hertz and vibrate at 40 hertz through this technology. That's only one of the layers. What if people wish not to use headphones? This technology of binaural beats that Robert Monroe developed, it doesn't work without headphones. So in the music, there is actual tone of 40 hertz, which sounds like a very low bass tone, very low. It's close to the lowest E note on the piano. If you play the lowest possible E, that is the tone of 40 hertz. Or not exactly, but it's very close to it. It's between E and D sharp. It's between the white and the black key in the bottom of the keyboard. About 5 notes from the very last note of the piano, of the grand piano. So that's the note that you hear in the music. It goes throughout the whole album. Each of our albums, regardless if it's jazz or world music or Persian music or Indian music or choral music or classical piano, it has this tone underlying the music. So you actually hear it and your body vibrates to it. And all the music that I composed had to conform and play with that tone. So the music is intentionally composed to work with that tone. And then the musicians that I composed to, they also play that tone or play the overtones, the higher vibrations within that tone, because each tone has higher vibrations that are within that tone. And that creates the brilliance of each tone. Any tone of music, if you cut the high frequencies within it, it becomes dull and muted tone. So every tone has higher vibrations that give the brilliance of it. So I wrote for the musicians, regardless which musicians I used, either flutist or pianist or guitarist, I wrote to them music that expresses and creates the vibrations of the higher tones of the low tone that only the double bass can play, the low 40 hertz, the actual 40 hertz, just the double. So we have 3 layers of 40 hertz in this music.
This is really layered.
Right.
It's highly layered.
Mm-hmm. It's a cocktail.
Yes. The 40 hertz, this is a little bit of a sidebar, maybe just me on the podcast. I'm always going down some weird side alley that's got my attention. Coming back to the psychoacoustics for a moment, what does 40 hertz play into the psychoacoustic world in some ways? Is there something else that's going on psychologically with 40 hertz? This is a different thing entirely.
Right. So psychoacoustics have to do with intervals, like the relationship between notes, like this note to this note. Why does this make me feel such and such? And this note to that note, why does this make me feel different? So it has to do with distances and relative vibrations. That's one side of psychoacoustic. And the other is rhythm, fast rhythm, regular rhythm, syncopated rhythm, irregular rhythm. It all have psychological, our brain interprets it psychologically. So psychoacoustic is the study of that. But here, it's more primitive than any psychoacoustic.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR designed to help practitioners run their business without running around. Managing a practice can mean juggling more tools than you ever planned to. One for booking, one for documentation, another for billing. Each solves a small part of the puzzle, but because they don't work together, the manual admin still adds up. Jane helps practitioners connect their core tools all in one place. Payments are taken and recorded directly into Jane. Jane Websites helps new patients find your clinic online, and if something needs attention, Jane's support team is available by phone, email, or chat with an understanding of how your entire system works together. For added peace of mind, Jane includes privacy and security features like two-step verification, role-based access levels, and HIPAA and PPDA compliance, so you can feel confident your practice and patients' data are protected. To learn more about how Jane can support you, your patients, and your business, head to jane.app/demo. And if you're ready to get started, you can use the code Qiological for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm thinking psychoacoustic is already dealing with a very primitive aspect of our brain in some reason, but this goes below that.
Right. We go below even like interpreting fast beat or slow beat before interpreting a this jumped in the music or that jump. It's more basic. There's no jumps, there's no intervals, there are no rhythms, there's just one tone and it's just one constant vibration. It's like a constant pressure, like a pressure point. It's a constant pressure in one pressure point, in one intensity. And for some reason, they found out that point, that frequency does that magic in the brain. And nobody quite know why. The researchers, the scientists, they don't know why 40 hertz and not 50 hertz and not 35 hertz. But most of the studies show that it's something about the way we are wired. That vibration is the most resonance, the thing that gets the most amount of resonance, which is meaning is the impact of vibration. That's a resonance. So you can think about it, if you could take an opera singer walks into a room and there's a wine glass, or there's a couple of wine glasses on the table, and the opera singer starts singing very high notes. She may get to a very, very high note, and that note, only that note, will break one of the glasses. The glasses that are smaller or bigger will not break at that note. That means the resonance, there's a certain vibration that the material just can't handle anymore. But it's very particular. And it's amazing.
To that particular glass, how the glass is made, the consistency of what's in it, the thickness, all these things.
Exactly. And then to shatter the other glasses that have a different mass, a different size, it would require a different note. A smaller glass may need a higher note. So it's very specific because we know that, and this is scientific phenomena, and a voice that breaks a glass, and the variety. Because of that, I believe that the particular nature of 40 hertz is not an illusion, it's not a myth, it's not a mysticism, it's real scientific fact. The scientists confirm that. They just don't know why. We don't know why yet. That particular vibration does particular things.
You know, this sounds like acupuncture. Many times people ask the question, well, how does it work? Well, we don't know why yet, but we know how to make it work.
Exactly.
And I'm glad you brought it back to Chinese medicine there, Michael, because our listeners, that's primarily why they listen to you. But just as a footnote with an exclamation point is that in the Neijing, each of the elements is assigned a key. And even the character for medicine in Chinese includes sound and vibration and delight. That doesn't say acupuncture. It's herbs and grasses, so sound healing is absolutely our birthright in Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine. And what we're doing is creating a pleasant experience utilizing that core belief, that core theory, let's say, or idea of our medicine. And in fact, our first work together was on the 6 healing sounds. And that was one of the keys to of what we talked about, Yuval. And when we did that first project, I was very green in all this, very green, not in Chinese medicine, but in clearly sound healing, was he composed the key for each of the elements. And one of the doorways in was the psychoacoustics. What are the emotions associated? And then the choice of the instruments, et cetera, followed all that. But we're actually talking about Chinese medicine or an energetic medicine, sound healing with all this.
Rick, what got you involved with this? I mean, you've always been and I just love the story too, graduated from school, looked in the back of a magazine, found a job. I mean, the world is actually so miraculous. I mean, sometimes I think we forget how flippin' miraculous the world really can be. And in the moments that we have in our lives sometimes, you look back and go, oh, that was a funny, weird thing that happened. No, it was a damn miracle. Like, how could all those things have come together in that way? It's really amazing.
The fact that the three of us are talking here is amazing that we all came together.
Well, there's that too. So what brought you to this musical endeavor?
Funny story.
I'm sure it is.
So I'm 30 years or so into practice and teaching of Chinese medicine. And I looked, there was a magazine
Oh, no.
called What is Enlightenment? It no longer exists, but it was a scholarly journal around spiritual development and stuff. And there was an ad about binaural beats. And I'd been playing ambient music in classrooms and treatment rooms, and I'd become quite bored with it, quite frankly. And I saw this, and I never heard of binaural beats, and I answered the ad. We never talked about the synchronicity of this, Yuval and I. I started to use binaural beats. And
Did you put headphone?
yeah, absolutely.
You did.
Because I was playing CDs. And the nature of that material I was getting, it was an organization in the Washington State at the time. After a while, the sounds and the kind of music they were using, there was a redundancy and an unpleasantness. And it became, instead of conducive to my meditation process, it became an irritant.
I'm really happy to hear you say this, because at one point I was playing around with binaural beats myself, because it's like a thing. You hear about, it's supposed to do these things, and I remember plugging it in, listening to it, and I'm thinking, there must be something wrong with me, because this stuff is mildly irritating.
Yep. And so the universe brought Yuval and I to teach at Esalen Institute at the same time in Big Sur, in the cliffs of Big Sur, and we met. And there's actually a longer backstory, which I'll save for your listeners from. But we met, and I said to him, he was teaching a class in sound and neuroscience, and I was teaching a course in traditional Thai medical massage. And I said, is there a way to bring a level of composition and performance to this area of mindfulness music, meditation music, binaural music, which makes it a joyful, a pleasant, a delightful experience? And he nodded and I nodded, and thus we formed a partnership. We never had a business plan. We never knew where we'd be. Certainly 16 years later, we didn't know that we would be working together as much as we have. We both have very busy professional and family lives on the side. But this became a real important part of each of our lives. And so that's sort of a coincidental, accidental, mystical experience that brought us together in a magical place, originally in Esalen. And here we are.
Yeah. So back to this issue that I had, and you mentioned it, that it was like more irritating than helpful. What is it about the binaural that can sometimes have this effect where...
I don't think it was binaural as much as the music that was accompanying it.
I heard from one of the healers that we worked with, and she mentioned an experience that she had with binaural beats that was irritating to her. And I can imagine there could be a couple of things that can happen with the binaural beats. First of all, I found out on YouTube and on the internet in general, there are so many binaural beats tracks now that are made by people who have no idea what they're doing. And that is one problem. And I find that there's so many lack of knowledge and lack of training in it. You don't study it in music schools. They don't have it in the conservatories. You don't have it anywhere. So people may just go for it and they put it for free on the internet and they get views and whatever because of the graphics or whatever, the color of the fonts, and people listening to it because they think it's good for them. I personally had an experience in a sound healing presentation of one of my colleagues who invited me, and my wife and I both went there and experienced it, and it was so bad. It was so bad. It was on the verge of making you sick. It was that bad. And after the event, I talked to the person that was facilitating it and created it, and I told him my feedback, why it was wrong, and he didn't know what I'm talking about. I mean, he had no idea. All the information that I presented to him to explain to him why it was damaging and why it was made wrong, it was like he never heard about anything that I talked about. So this is the level that the audience is exposed to right now in this field, everywhere. And because it's subliminal, because it's below the music, people may like the music, but they don't realize that the tones below are creating friction and tension rather than creating harmony or really helping them. So people who are very sensitive may feel it. Most people may not feel it, or they may not really associate, or they may go home and feel very tired. But they don't know why they feel tired. They just think, oh, it's like working out. After working out, maybe I feel tired. Maybe I did a sound healing session and I feel wiped out after. Maybe that's fine. That's normal. But people, they're not educated in this field. They're not sensitive enough to analyze it. They don't have the tools to understand what's going on. So there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues with that. It's not standardized. It's not part of education systems. It's a wild west. So if somebody says to me, look, I don't like binaural beats, it makes me nervous, it makes me this, I had bad experience with that, I take what they say in face value, and I can't really know what they're talking about until I get the music and I can analyze it and find out what's wrong. There's so many things can go wrong. It can be the volume in the headphones. It can be the nature of the beats. Yeah, I'll give you one more example. It was a funny example where there was a company that make devices with some tones for sleep. And somebody gave me this device and they said, oh, they have this therapy where, they put those tones. And on top of the tones, they just license music like Mozart Symphony 34, recorded by the Berlin Symphony. Or they don't take the Berlin Symphony, they take a very, a small town in Switzerland that nobody ever heard, and they license it for nothing. And they put that Mozart Symphony on top of the tones. And I listened to it and I heard the tones because they're very, very soft in the background. I could hear the tones and I could hear that they have no musical relationship to the Mozart. So it creates tension all the time. It's like fighting with the Mozart. And then they have channels. They have 100 different pieces of music. And all those pieces of music are just put together with their tones. And the tones by itself may do good, but they're creating tension with the music that they put on top of it to mask the tone, because nobody wants to sit with tones, with boring, annoying tones. So the tones that manipulate your brain are being brought to the background. They are very soft, they're very low, and then you need to put something pleasant on top. And a lot of people have no awareness and no idea that the music has to be in harmony with the tones.
Mm-hmm.
See?
This is like working with herbs. You can have herbs that do different things in different ways. Sometimes they're not that harmonious. They're actually moving in opposite directions. And so you need to have something in that will harmonize the actions of everything so that the whole thing has a kind of coherence to it.
Right. And to do that, you need to know a lot about herbology, right? To harmonize formulas and to make it work.
Or in your case, music.
Right? So it's the same thing. I agree. It's a great analogy.
And what a great segue to talk about our current project.
Oh, the plants. Right.
You have a little thing going on. But before we get to the plants, we're going to get into the plants. But there's something I'd like to do. We've been talking about this music and these sounds. So we're going to just take a moment and play a piece for people to listen to. So all y'all out there in Radio Land, just enjoy a listen or two for a moment to the work that Yuval and Rick are doing. Rick, what are you guys up to with herbs and music?
So for the last approximately 4 years, little by little, we've been working on a project which we call plant music medicine. We used an established technology called plant wave, which picks up electrostatic changes in a plant, which is going to relate to photosynthesis and the movement of fluids in the plants. And it's a sensitive device, use alligator clips on the plant, and it goes through an algorithmic box, which converts those vibrations into sound files.
So you're catching the song of a living plant.
You're catching the song, the vibrations of the living plant, yeah. So one of Yuval's mentees, a wonderful man named Zach, we sent him out to the LA Botanical Gardens, the Descanso Gardens in Pasadena, which is magnificent. And there's actually an herb garden that Yosan and Emperors keeps in Venice. We sent him there. We originally had a list of plants we wanted to use, a lot of them Chinese herbs, which we couldn't find. But the chief botanists at the different places were so cooperative, we ended up recording over 100 medicinal herb plants. Then I came up with, which our audience knows, the 10 common problems that we face in clinic, whether it's anxiety, sleep, digestive problems, fortifying the lungs and the immune system. And we had this list of herbs. We had the list of common complaints. And I sent those lists to a master herbalist of both Eastern and Western in Portland, a woman named Ellen Sheffy, and asked her to come up with therapeutic balanced formulas and percentages of the herbs, like we do in Chinese herbology, East Asian herbology, to come up with therapeutic formulas of these herbs as if you were making a tea. And then we handed this information to Yuval. Now, meanwhile, Yuval had taken the individual herbs and scored them. He took the raw sound and derived the notes that they were playing. And it's not a single note. The plants, they're vital. They're speaking in a variety of tongues, let's say. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges, creative challenges, because he had to make something delightful, listenable, some musicality of a very diverse body of information. And the plants created the structure. And then we came up with this plant music medicine project, which is a cross-species communication. And it's remarkable. And I really commend Yuval for the creativity he showed in this. And I let him talk to us about the challenges and how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And he had to call on his intuition and dreams in many, many instances.
Right. It's dealing with collaborators, music collaborators, the plants who are not human, and they don't care about the human audience. But I was aware that the human audience would have to listen to it. And the plants didn't care, really. So my job was to be the editor, the human editor, where I listened to the songs of the plants. And some of the songs were just crazy music, like alien music. It's not human music. And it's weird, and it's strange, and it's not pleasurable. And it doesn't have repetitions. And our human brain, it's very interesting that our brain prefers repetition. Because when we repeat something, we comprehend and we feel secure because we saw it already. And the brain has this satisfaction that, oh, I recognize that pattern. I saw that pattern before. So the second time the brain see the pattern, the brain said to itself, hey, I know that.
I know that our brains love to map experience.
Right, right. And our brain doesn't like nonstop linear, with never repeating anything, never having theme and variations. See, the plants don't need theme and variations, but we need theme and variations. We get satisfaction for theme and variations, but the plants don't need it, because what the plants giving us is the bioelectrical signals that they use, like our brain waves. When we think, our brain vibrates a certain way. When we sleep, our brain vibrates a different way. Same thing with the plants. When they eat, when they do their thing, their living, they have different vibrations in different rhythms that facilitate their living. And that is what we captured. We captured, we call it the secret songs of plants. This is what the plants are singing, but really what it is, it's bioelectrical signals of the living activity and the various different living modes that the plants need to vibrate and have some kind of a nervous system that works on electricity between the different parts of the plants. And we captured that and made music out of that. And that was very challenging to make music out of that.
Because it's so alien to us.
Exactly. And the breakthrough that I had with this is when I understood that without theme and variations, without repetitions, human audience will not dig this, will never dig this. And I realized that, number one, I made a rule for myself for this project to be authentic and for the integrity of the project, that I'm not allowed to change the notes of the plants. I'm not allowed to change any note. But I reserved my right to be an editor or the film director that sits in the editing room and look at all the footage of the actors. The actor did this and they did another take and 10 different takes, and the actors did many different things, and the director says to the editor, I want this segment, and throw everything out to the trash. And that's what ends up in the movie. It's that one scene. So I reserved myself to be the director, the film director, music director, editor, whatever you call it. And I listened to the plants very carefully, and I chose the moments where they made music that I found interesting musically. And then I start repeating it, just like in a movie where you can, there's an actor shuts the door, the director has the artistic freedom to use the same shot again, or from a different angle, or from a different camera of the same shot, or the actual same shot. They can use it again in the movie, in a flashback, whatever. So I had the right to repeat things. And by creating repetitions of the themes, what the plants gave me, I created songs.
You can make it into music.
I made it into music. So it's really a collaboration between me and the plants. And then I went another level where I orchestrated it to the instrument. So I decided, the turmeric will be the bassoon, and the ginger will be the bass clarinet, and the citrus will be the trumpet. And I meditated on the plants and looked at the photos and looked at videos of plants and sat with some of the plants. I just sat with them and meditated, and it came to me, this is a trumpet. This is a trombone. This is the bass bassoon. And this is a marimba, like the coffee bean. In the constipation formula, there's coffee.
It's the marimba. Yes, it is.
And the coffee beans. And you know what? The music that the coffee plant gave us was tutum, 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 papapum, papum. It was so bouncy and so jumpy and so rhythmic, more than any other plant. Guess what? All this energy, all this caffeine. And the marimba would be the best thing to play those sounds that came from the coffee plant. So that's how I worked. And then on top of all that, I came up with the crazy idea of what if I bring a singer? Because I was thinking this is the plant songs, but who's singing? So I thought I'll bring a singer and I'll match some lyrics from healing mantras from Sanskrit, from Hebrew, and we commissioned 3 poems from 2 writers who wrote poems about the formula and the plants, the message. And so we got some lyrics from traditional sources, from contemporary sources, and I wrote the melody for the singer to sing from the combination of the different plants songs that in that formula. Because if you have 7 different plants, or 5 or 4 different plants in a formula, they're all playing together based on the percentages. So if one of them is 33% of the formula, they get to play more. And if one is only 8% of the formula, they play less. And I calculated the timing. Their activity in the music is based on their activity in the formula. You see? It's crazy.
Are you sneezing? Is your nose running? Are you feeling stuffed up? Spring is here, and for many of us, so are seasonal allergies. This is the time of year when patients need support they can count on. At Blue Poppy, they're here to help you stay one step ahead. Introducing Allerease, a trusted formula designed to address sneezing and the runny, stuffy nose of spring allergies. Based on the classic Bicho Tang and refined for modern clinical use, Allergies is crafted to deliver consistent, reliable results, so your patients can breathe easier and you can treat with confidence. Because when your formulas are dependable, your focus stays where it belongs, on your patients. Make this spring a healthier one for you and for them. Stock up on Allergies today. Blue Poppy, trusted by practitioners since 1982. It is a little crazy. It's amazing. And, I love hearing how you see yourself as the director or the film editor, especially given that you've had decades of scoring films and shows, and that this is what you do. This is what your life is. You edit, you score, you create these backgrounds for experiences. And here you're taking the input from these creatures that we share a planet with. But oh my goodness, we are so different from plants.
Right. But I think this, like Dr. Gold said, this is a in-between species or bi-species musical collaboration. We have here both the inhuman and the human, the beyond human and the human working together to bring this fruit. And this is really a pioneering project. As far as I know, there was never in the history of humankind been a project where you took medicinal formulas and turned their energy into music, into sounds, and then you go and you play it back to the audience. And it's really interesting to see what's going to happen, how people are going to be affected by those musical formulas that correspond to the herbal formulas.
So we eventually used 24 different instruments we used. And our vocalist is a remarkable Korean-American opera singer, very avant-garde, who really got what we were doing. She was of the plants. And one other thing I'd like to add, as a lifelong gardener, there's something called companion planting in a garden, where things work better together. And sometimes you put two plants together, they just don't thrive. And so that's sort of, we created a companion sound garden with this work. And once you listen to the music, and you've all organized it in the playlist, we'd say, so that there's a coherence and a comfort, almost like either lying in a meadow surrounded by plants or in a forest being nourished by nature. It has that quality to it.
I have that feeling too when I listen to it. And I think I go back to the research that I've done, which I think was very important in the very beginning when Rick and I were introduced to this device that collects the vibrations from the plants. And when we found out about that this exists, I listened to all the music that I could find on the internet from people who use that little device. And I found out that everybody have been doing electronic music from the plant sound. Everybody plugged that little device from the plants to a synthesizer. And what happened is that in most cases, I assume they got bored and disappointed by the real music that came from the plants because it was so alien, that what I found out that the people that have been doing this plant music, they've been creating special patterns that they created on the synthesizer, like da 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 da, or they programmed the synthesizer to do that, and the poor plant, just gave one note, and that trigger an event that a human created on the synthesizer, and you listen to it, and people saying, oh, this is so psychedelic, this is so cool, this is plants music. But the plants didn't create those human-like patterns that comes from the synthesizer. And the whole thing with the synthesizer, with the electronic, to me seemed so alien to the nature of plants. To me, it seemed like the wrong avenue, the wrong vehicle.
Yeah, you took a whole different approach. First of all, you acted as a director and editor to find something musical. But then, if I'm hearing you correctly, you used human beings playing instruments. You used wind instruments. There were reeds that were vibrating. There were strings that were vibrating. That's different than a synthesizer, isn't it?
Exactly. So I thought we ought to take the vibrations from the plants and give it to humans that play acoustic instruments, not electronic instruments, and let the human breath and the human touch, the human nervous system, the human soul, to sing back to us the songs that we got from the plant. And I thought this is the closest thing, this is the most organic thing that I could think of to do with the plant's music. So that's what we did. So this is really a pioneering landmark project. We worked on it for 5 years, nonstop for 5 years, including all the research and all the development. It's probably the most challenging and longest project I ever worked on.
5 years is a long time.
It was not easy. It was not easy. It was very challenging because some of the material was so difficult to decipher and to work with because it was not me. It was not something that I would choose to compose. It was not my choices. And I had to find the diamonds in the mud many times. I had to figure out where is the diamond in all this mud, and I would listen to it again and again to try to find. Some of the diamonds were obvious. You hear something and you say, oh, that's cool, or that's interesting, or that's evocative. That makes me feel that I need to be on alert. Like with the immune system, the music from the immune system formula was very tense. And the music that came from the sleep formula was very sweet. It was amazing how the sounds that came from the plants were really affirming the impact of what they're supposed to do as herbs. So that was an amazing thing. And the coffee, for example, the coffee was amazing. No, that sounds like the impact of caffeine. That sounds like the impact of lavender. Or, if you just hold lavender and you smell it, there's an impact on your nervous system. And the music that came from the lavender confirmed that. So sometimes there were diamonds that were obvious, and sometimes some plants, it was very difficult to find. They gave us, 10 minutes of performance. And in that 10 minutes of performance, to find the beauty or the diamond, the things that humans will appreciate, that I could work with, that I could appreciate as a composer, that I could work with, that I could do variations, that I could do something meaningful musically. Sometimes it was really, really, really difficult.
What's really interesting to me about this is, look, you're a composer. You've been listening to music and utilizing music and understanding how to score it, how it makes people feel, what it does. You know that language. And so here you are listening to a different musical language from a different creature. But in some ways, all the work that you've done over all these years of being able to, what's the word that I'm searching for? It's like you know how to find a presence in it. Yeah?
I think everything I've done, I think you're right. Everything prepared me. Everything that I did, everything that I studied, every experience that I've had as a composer prepared me to deal with this very challenging, to work with the bioelectrical vibrations of medicinal plants and to make it work as a formula. Imagine you have 7 plants and 3 of them are giving you some pleasing materials to work with, but the other 4 are completely annoying. And there's nothing you could find there that would work with the first 3. You have to figure out musically how these 7 plants sing together. It's not even, just to do a song with one plant, let's say just the lavender, okay, that's one thing. But to do something with the ginger and the cardamom and the turmeric and all those have to work together with the percentages. And sometimes it was very hard to find how to do it. It's not enough to choose the best moments of each because they have to work as an ensemble. One of the plants can star on his own, but to make them work as an ensemble and to feature the one that the formula tells me to feature. The formula tells me this plant is 33%. The other plant who is only 5% to be the soloist. But no. The formula says, no. So this project, we had a lot of unusual limitations and challenges that normal composition rarely have.
Yes. So what got you through that? What got you through the moments where you're scratching your head and you're thinking, is this a fool's errand or am I onto something?
Right. I think the fact that I had 5 years, that I could go to other projects and come back to it, and other projects and come back to it, gave me the perspective, gave me the growth, the time to kind of cook with it and to start seeing and hearing things that were really nuanced that I didn't appreciate in the first listen. So the longer I spend with the difficult parts of this project, I learned and I found, I came up with creative ideas to make it beautiful. So I think it was the time, like to sit with it, and not to give up, and not to say, this is impossible task. I'm not going to work with this formula. You know what? Give me another formula. I never said that. I never fired my plans. I stuck with it. And some formulas took shorter time, and some formulas took a lot longer time.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation at this moment, speaking about timing and the miraculous and just how things come about. I've been practicing medicine for north of 25 years, and sometimes I'd certainly like it to be a lot easier than it is. I wish I could understand things quicker, but I'm not that quick of a study. On occasion, things come through, but I'm not that quick of a study. And over time, I have found in trying to stay with things, this is just something I say to myself, mostly to encourage myself so I don't quit. I tell myself, well, the interesting things are in the difficulties. It's the difficult parts that are where the interesting things are. And I repeat it to myself like a mantra so I don't quit. And I don't know if I'm just blowing smoke up my dress or if that really is true. And so I hear you talking about working on this for 5 years. Thank goodness you have other projects. You come away from it, you come back with new eyes, you take a break, you look at it again. Oh, there's something I didn't hear before. Oh, I didn't know that was there. Right? You need time away and you need time in it. But this thing about staying with the difficulties, oh man, I think it's so important.
And there's one insight that I got from a sculptor who was a late sculptor named Henry Waddell. He was in the Sedona area in Arizona. He has many sculptures in public spaces. He was known in the southwest area of the country. Henry Waddell, his name. And I scored a movie for his daughter, Amy Waddell, who's a director. So many, many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when I scored that film for her and another film, I met her father, the sculptor, and we talked about the creative process for him as a sculptor and for me as a composer. And he said to me something I'll never forget. 20 years ago, he said to me, I said something like, oh, I worked on this project, then I took a break from it, and I went to work on another project, and then I came back with fresh eye, what we're talking about right now. And he stopped me right there, and he said, you think you took a break from that project, but you never take a break from project. You always work on it in the back of your mind. When you sleep, you're working on it. When you're reading something else, you're working on it. You are working on it, but you don't know. And that's why when you come back, it's not just fresh air. Your mind has been working on it, and you don't even know. So I learned something from him back then, and I realized, you know what? As a composer, I'm working all the time. I'm working when I'm not working. I'm working when I'm sailing a boat. I'm working when I'm gardening. It's working. The creative mind is working on the project. If you are in the midst of a creative project, you are working all the time.
That's why I love my work.
Yeah. Me too.
And I recognized the complexity of this early on. And I was never cracking the whip. When are you going to get this? I trusted Yuval. We've learned to work together. I know that he's going to do it. And so there was never external pressure. Maybe he put pressure on himself to get it off of his desk.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that. Rick is the best collaborator I ever worked with. And it's such a pleasure to work like that, where it's, you have two mature people working together, and it's such a pleasure. And the emphasis is on the quality. It's not about the speed, it's about the quality. That is the most important thing. And I really appreciate it with Rick. One of the Hollywood directors, an Oscar-winning Hollywood director who I'm working with right now. I'm scoring a film for him. And he told me he's in his early 80s, okay? He is very experienced. He's been 50 years or so directing movies in Hollywood. And he told me, there's a saying in Hollywood, do you want it now or do you want it good? When the producer's like hitting on the head of the director and saying, we need you to finish that movie. We need you to finish that movie. We need you to finish that script. Finish that script. We need the script tomorrow morning. So the directors and the writers would say to the producer, do you want it now or do you want it good?
I'd like our listeners to know that all the individual herbs and the formulas are going to be on our website in the liner notes. The mantras, the prayers, the poems are all going to be available in the liner notes. We're open to collaborate. Any herbalists that are listeners right now, if you think you want to work with us to create the formulas that we could partner up with based on these, that we could sip the tea and listen to the music simultaneously and create, more vibrations in our brains and our physiology, we're all in on it. We want to create a community that's pursuing this together.
I think also that there's an educational opportunity here. If we could present it to children and families and teachers and show children that this came from the turmeric plant. The lavender that you see right here, that's the music that came out of it. It's not just a plant. It's a living being. I think there can be really an amazing moment in an educational situation for children to realize that they live among plants that have sounds in them.
Any of our colleagues that have major grows of Chinese herb plants, we'd like to record and build our sound library. Those just weren't really available to us here, but we'd like to collaborate on that too.
I will make sure all that contact information is on the show notes page, so people can just head over to the website and get all of that, along with all the other work that you guys are doing. And a few samples too. Yeah, we could put a few samples over there.
Yeah, sure.
For people.
Absolutely.
Great. Man, you guys have been so busy. This sounds like an incredible ongoing project that you've got right now.
Yeah, we've created an amazing catalog of hundreds and hundreds. I think over 700 musical tracks for healing sounds and hours and hours and hours of albums. And we have audio courses, meditation courses about Ayurvedic medicine and sound and Chinese medicine and sound. And it's all part of our website. It's all available there.
Terrific. Give us that website address so people can pop over real quick.
It's Meta with double T. metamindfulnessmusic.com.
Wonderful.
And Yuval has an entire career separate from our work together, which is yuvalronmusic.com, which has his film scores and his touring schedule and his foundation. And
yeah, good.
When he's not busy scoring films.
Yeah, thank you.
Yuval, I really appreciate what you had to say in particular about that we're always working on something that's important to us.
Yeah.
Whatever creative endeavor we're involved in, there's a wholeness to us that we bring to it, and not to forget that.
It's not work if you love what you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
Any final things to say before we wind this down for today?
Well, thank you, Michael, for including us. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. You've always give good questions and insights, and Yuval knows how I feel, but in gratitude towards him and his creativity and our partnership.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. It felt like we're sitting in a living room and having an interesting conversation. I didn't feel that we were on a podcast or recording, and I just felt we had a beautiful conversation.
That's what we do here at Geological.
Yeah.
We're just sitting down for tea with friends. I always love hearing stories that begin with, hey, what about this? That start off with a question that has no quickly reached conclusion or answer, a question that might take you down a series of dead ends or into a whole new way of seeing things. I enjoyed hearing about Yuval's graduating from the Berklee School of Music and then serendipitously finding an ad in the back of a magazine that led him to working with Robert Malone. Yeah, the Robert Malone. And how that project with the pioneer of binaural beats would later inform his work. And how sometimes the world just puts things in your path that you didn't ask for, but it would seem needed you to contribute to a particular piece of work. I also love that story that Yuval shared with us on the perspective of the sculptor Henry Waddell, that when we take on something big, or maybe it's something big that's taking us on, that it might seem we are stepping away from the endeavor. But in reality, in the back of our minds, it's being worked on. That there is only so much that can be processed cognitively. That much of the process of creation, it happens in the dark. And that this is a trustworthy process. The conversation on psychoacoustics, that we are wired to respond to particular sounds and progressions of musical notes, that there's a kind of auditory signaling shared by humans regardless of culture or language. I'm not sure what to make of this, other than it's another indication that as different as we all are, there are aspects of us that truly do point towards some kind of unity. As with all my favorite conversations, this one leaves me with more questions than answers. There's something about questions that opens the mind and softens the sense of certainty that can so easily cloud the senses.